So today we've got Kaveh, Albert, Mina talking about the Islamic State. G'day boys.
G'day.
Alright, so the Islamic State, who are they? Who are these guys?
Kaveh, you want to have a
go? Islamic State, I think, besides the obvious and obviously taking a satirical point of view, they're a bunch of maniacs.
Yeah.
They're the result, I think, of a discontent region. They're a result of several failed revolutions.
Mm-hmm.
They're the result of historical continuity in imperialism and colonialism. They are a result of religious extremism without education,
Yep.
without secular education, religion being the only source of education, and above all, they're the result of a really bad unemployment rate within a region which has significantly high levels of younger individuals.
Excellent. Anybody want to elaborate any further on their definition of?
We can get into the specifics and say that they're predominantly Sunnis, seeking to establish some sort of caliphate, at least in their own words. They're formerly called Al-Qaeda in Iraq. So ISIS has actually been around a little bit longer than people understand. So I think it goes back as far as 2006 or so.
Yeah. So basically, what Islamic State is basically a Sunni Muslim group that want to establish a caliphate first in Syria and Iraq, but then the end goal is to expand to the places where Islam at its height had control of, to remove all of what they believe are the incorrect practices of Muslims. So get rid of the kings, get rid of the dictators, get rid of alcohol consumption, go back to what they see as a proper way of living, and then to take over the world.
Yeah.
That is to do what they say is what good Muslims should do. And they are a product of the geopolitics of the region. They are a product of the decisions made in the region, not months and years before they formed.
Yeah.
There was no Islamic State without removing Saddam Hussein, without encouraging rebels to fight against Bashar al-Assad in Syria. There is no Islamic State without the Sykes-Picot Agreement post-World War I to cover up the Ottoman Empire in the most ridiculous way in order to make ethnic and religious groups who hated each other under one country.
Yeah.
You have to go back to that time, over more than 150 years, to the breakup of the Ottoman Empire, and you see this stream, and you see Sayyid Qutb in an Egyptian jail in the 1960s being beheaded because he was disgusted with his society. He went to America, he comes back, he becomes radicalized, and he writes a very strong a book saying, Muslims have to fight, they have to fight against their dictators. Just because the leader is Muslim doesn't matter. And Sayyid Qutb is considered like the grandfather of jihadists. And then you got a guy, Hassan al-Banna. Out of that you got Ayman al-Zawahiri, who comes from that place. He goes on to become the second and then the first in charge of Al-Qaeda. You have Bin Laden, the September 11 events, the geopolitics after the Cold War, all these things happening.
The Mujahideen in the 70s.
Yeah, in Afghanistan.
And then, sorry, so I just want to clarify a couple of things. You initially presented them as an ideological movement, but then you said they're a geopolitical movement.
They're everything. So movements can be both ideological in nature. So what I mean is,
on the grassroots, you could say that it's ideologically based.
But where did they spring from? So to say
in
for
terms
example,
of direction, maybe if we can define it in terms of direction, because if the direction if the ultimate aim is a caliphate, it's specifically an ideological, which essentially gives life to a economic to a state, I guess, to some degree. Not in the Western sense, but
in its self-determined sense.
And but if it's geopolitical, then the struggle changes. The debate changes. Then it's not about establishing an ideology. It becomes about resistance against a political direction or.
But can't it be both, Kaveh? Can't you see like in the behaviour?
How though? But the end result.
I think the ideal of this caliphate comes as a result of the geopolitical
Geopolitics,
situation. So at the essence of it, it is geopolitical. I think that's why Islamic State may be so attractive to some people
Correct.
in that region because of the circumstances that
It's not because they're saying, wow, I love the idea of Islamic State. It's because they're saying they're resisting
I'm
badness.
hungry.
Well, they're resisting badness.
Yeah, I'm hungry, man, and these
they've
guys
got
are a
their
solution.
feet. Yeah, they've got.
And these
It's
guys-
not that people are sitting there going, I think the ideas of Islamic State seems to convince me based on these verses. Well, that seems rational. No, it can be for a lot of people quite emotive. They're fighting against injustice.
Yeah.
So that's what it means, Kaveh, to be geopolitical nature. But like with anything, it's like a cake is not made of one ingredient. It's made up of many.
And it has to be sold as an ideal rather than geopolitical.
Yeah, that would. I mean, I can see where you're coming from with that. I think, and I would, I could accept that argument if there was more of a bigger following.
But it's got a huge following.
Because at the moment the Islamic State is actually being fought best from within it,
I've heard that too.
the region, and it's being fought best not only through actual hard resistance but ideological resistance, and in essence they haven't won the hearts and minds of the people.
Well, that's right, and you're not going to win hearts and minds if you're killing your own Sunnis. You're not going to convince them on an ideological level when you're killing your own Sunnis. And I understand in terms of people being impoverished. I mean, Egypt had a similar problem with the Muslim Brotherhood. How did they convince to recruit people? Here's your monthly allowance. I'll like
some
man to
flour.
come. I mean, it's very simple to convince people in a difficult position to go off and do stupid things.
Yeah,
and they've got nothing else to lose.
I think that's where I'm going with it, because if it was an ideological movement, then if that argument was going to be put forward, then it has to be justified by its following. And at the moment, what we're getting from the Middle East and from that region is that it hasn't won the hearts and minds of the people. Therefore, I think we can. Again, what I think, I guess, matters much less. The point of view that I'm taking is that it's more, it's a power source that's established, and I think it's established around some things that are much less ideological and much less divine and much less I guess even ideally pleasant to people, and more it's working more on that element of human nature that gets attracted to power without regulation, to the ability to dictate its to people how to go about things.
I can, to a certain extent, accept that at the upper levels, perhaps, of ISIS, but I still think that, to a certain extent, on the grassroots, a lot of them do believe that it's an ideological cause, and I don't know how you can split between the two.
Yeah, I
think
would suggest as well.
Yeah,
I would say you got to be careful. Sometimes you want to say it's geopolitics because you don't want to say it's ideological. So say it's ideological, then you're putting into question Islam. You're putting into question the theology of something that might be dear to you. And it would be easy to say, they're just unemployed, they're bored, they're angry, and there's a power vacuum, and they want to fight. But it's what can happen is, like with for example, a Christian militant group is, let's kill blacks because we're all Christians, and the Bible has this verse about blacks. But really, what it is I don't like these strange people in my neighborhood.
Yeah.
Now let me couch what I would not rather say in terms that make it appear that I'm just an innocent bystander. I'm just here. I don't hate blacks, but the Bible says this.
I think I know what you guys are saying. I think what I'm trying to get at is that yes, it's the geopolitical issue, the economic issue, the social issue that they're facing. That's a reality. The reality of a social problem is that it has the vigilantes. It has the social outcasts. We have that here.
Well, there are gangs in America for the same exact reasons.
So that when you have that, then there is this second element, I believe, and again, this one is in my humble opinion. The second element is the potential of religion when it's religion alone, and it is presented, studied through a very sort of blindfolded approach. Yeah, that has potential, because if you can convince someone that this is how the text is interpreted, that this is what you have to do. It's an easy formula.
And it's that coupled with...
That's right.
Yeah.
However, this is the third element I think we're not considering, is that it is the criminal elements within these societies that are taking up arms in this way.
Yep.
It is those
Destroyed.
criminal elements. However, and again, I'm making a generalization. Obviously, there are exceptions, and I think the exceptions. You might find the exceptions actually approach this. They engage with it, and there's been stories of people actually reverting back and going, "Hold on, this is not
it's
too far.
this is too much." Yeah,
And even, I mean, and again, this is by no way justification for Al Qaeda, as you would know, but Al Qaeda
Separated
themselves because of their approach.
But now they've joined again.
Actually, AP.
Now they've joined again.
Definitely.
Well, it's not Al Qaeda. It's Nusra or.
Yeah, what's an offshoot of Al
Yeah.
Qaeda? So
Yeah.
affiliate.
And again, those things are not justifications for justice, because those things are they're still political, strategic decisions.
Absolutely.
However, I believe that it is the criminal elements within those regions that are joining, because we have a social problem here. The social problem, I think, and I'm making a comparison, if I can, but it's a far-fetched comparison in some ways. We have a social problem here, and that is that sometimes on the fringes of society we have some groups, minority groups, that do not integrate within society. The minority groups could be religious minorities, ethnic minorities. However, they could also be class minorities.
Yep.
So the underclass, adding, let's
The
just
poor.
say, the poorer areas, Minto, EDS, housing commissions, where they're falling into a cycle, and they're a minority class. And they're not religiously or ethnically minoritized, but economically minoritized.
My problem
Now,
is...
sorry, I'll make
Sorry,
this
go
point
on,
and all that.
please.
Now, they also partake in society, okay, in extreme ways. So, for example, they actually, I think it was ABC that did an analysis on the guy that went over to join Islamic State and had his kid hold up a head, and they realized this guy is, by evidence, a criminal. He's criminally natured.
And you don't need to look at his ethnicity or his
Yes,
religion or
and
anything else.
and what he's done is he's latched on in a criminal way. He's latched on to an ideology and approached it that way. Just like, for example, we might have again white supremacy as an extreme ideology, and then some bloke that doesn't that doesn't know any better approaches that and starts being racist. You know what I mean? And I think that's an extreme behaviour in itself, racism.
Yeah.
So,
That's the point.
sorry, if I could
My-
just... Oh, sorry.
Go on.
No, no.
I was
You-
going to say my problem with the comparison with the disenfranchised people in Minto, for example, is that they're not shooting down army helicopters with Stinger missiles. They're not, using anti-tank weapons, and it's very
I
extreme.
think, sorry, I'm going to answer that right now because I think it's necessary. I'm making a relative comparison, so it's
Not
that's
quantitative,
relative.
yeah.
That not direct comparison.
No,
it's a relative to our society, which is a democratic, free society,
Yeah.
and it's
Peaceful.
able to maintain its legal system, comparing to a society which has fallen apart.
Interesting that you brought that up. It's almost as though they're the ones that have made it fall over.
Oh well, that's a place. That's another argument within itself, because we can argue within the chicken come
Causes.
first or
I
the
think
egg.
it's relevant to bring up, how do they make their money? How do they?
Oh, this is exactly where I want to take this. So we've spoken a lot about the disenfranchised young people or people who are getting involved in, into this organisation for whatever their reasons. This organisation would have no wings unless it was funded.
And it's being funded very well.
Good. Who's funding it?
Well,
What's
they're
happening?
funding it themselves. They're funding it themselves. So when
Now they are.
Well,
Initially. So from my understanding, they walked in and they took over banks.
and they took over oil fields.
And they took over oil fields. So
That
so
were
now
supplying
that
$3 million a day.
excellent. So now they're self-sufficient.
Yeah.
You do not walk in and take over banks and oil fields
You need
fields
state
unless you're
backing.
resourced.
Yeah.
State
So
backing.
yeah. So they were.
look at Qatar. It just came out that
Huge amounts.
Sepp Blatter's going to remove the World Cup from them in 2022 because he says the Sheikh's financing them. So obviously they have state backing,
Yeah.
and there's other sources that suggest it's also Saudi Arabian and Turkish state backing.
Also, not only states, rich members of the
Oligarchs.
society
That's right.
who think, I agree with that. Or geopolitical decisions made saying, well, the enemy of my enemy is my friend. Here's a bit of money, enemy of my enemy.
Yeah.
deal with this now?
Yeah, of course. I think to answer your question, there are so many hands in this, and this is a melting pot with a lot of hands in it.
Yeah.
Now there's some far-fetched approaches to this. It's supported by the Mossad. It's a plot of America, man.
But you don't even need to go that.
Sorry,
Yeah,
you
yeah,
just read
yeah,
CFR
yeah,
publications.
yeah.
That's, sorry.
Yeah, no, sorry. What I'm saying is, you can go that and take that far-fetched approach. Is it wrong? Maybe, but maybe not. I don't think we can go that extreme with anything because it's such a mess. Everybody has a hand in it. When they take an oil field, when they take Mosul, when they take Kirkuk,
yeah.
they don't anymore need anyone's backing.
That's it.
They need buyers.
And they have buyers in
Yes,
Turkey.
and
That's very exactly.
and a country in the EU was found that is buying ISIS oil. You know what I mean?
That's right.
Where we come back to the question that capital essentially speaks the loudest. Money speaks the loudest in this instance. And as soon as they have that much control over resources, over currency, then
They become a lot more attractive. They become a lot more powerful.
attractive and even capable through the passivity of the other nations. So, for example, if you all of a sudden you've got ISIS knocking at your door, going, listen, you're getting your barrels of oil for $70 a barrel. I'm going to give it to you for $30 a barrel. You're not going to say anything more about ISIS. You're going to change the news about Kim Kardashian's butt. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So it's
Absolutely.
it's something that needs to be acknowledged. The complacency, which is criminal, by staying silent, by association, by third parties, fourth parties, and purchases of oil and gas.
Really very interesting. This is a very, very loaded topic. Thank you very much, gentlemen, for joining us.
Thanks.
It's good.
Cheers.